Have to move the mic over. All right. We are continuing on with Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I will give just a couple minutes for people to join if you're interested and move some screen stuff around. Okay. I believe we are good. Got my water in place, which all about that water. Stay hydrated. Let's open back up. Last time, I something in my teeth. So last time we finished chapter 1, and it was, I forget the name of it. Let's see, part 1, Playing Pilgrims, learning about Pilgrim's Progress and their work in there. So now, continuing on with chapter 2, A Merry Christmas. So they went to bed, their mom came home, they heard the letter from their dad. Let's continue on. Chapter 2, A Merry Christmas. Jo was the first to wake in the gray dawn of Christmas morning. No stockings hung at the fireplace, and for a moment she felt as much disappointed as she did long ago when her little sock fell down because it was so crammed with goodies. Then she remembered her mother's promise, and slipping her hand under her pillow, drew out a little crimson-covered book. She knew it very well, for it was that beautiful old story of the best life ever lived, and Jo felt that it was a true guidebook for any pilgrim going the long journey. She woke Meg with a "Merry Christmas!" and bade her see what was under her pillow. A green-covered book appeared with the same picture inside and a few words written by their mother, which made their one present very precious in their eyes. Presently, Beth and Amy woke to rummage and find their little books also. One dove-colored, the other blue, and all sat looking at and talking about them, while the east grew rosy with the coming day. In spite of her small vanities, Margaret had a sweet, pious nature, which unconsciously influenced her sisters, especially Jo, who loved her very tenderly and obeyed her sisters. Who loved her very tenderly and obeyed her because her advice was so gently given. "Girls," said Meg, seriously looking from the tumbled head beside her to the two little nightcapped ones in the room beyond, "Mother wants us to read and love and mind these books, and we must begin at once. We used to be faithful about it, but since Father went away and all this war trouble unsettled us, we've neglected many things. You can do as you please, but I shall keep my book on the table here and read a little every morning as soon as I wake, for I know it will do me good and help me through the day." Then she opened her new book and began to read. Jo put her arm around her and, leaning cheek to cheek, read also with the quiet expression so seldom seen on her restless face. "How good Meg is! Come, Amy, let's do as they do. I'll help you with the hard words and they'll explain things if we don't understand," whispered Beth, very much impressed by the pretty books and her sister's example. "I'm glad mine is blue," said Amy, and then the rooms were very still while the pages were softly turned and the winter sunshine crept in to touch the bright heads and serious faces with a Christmas greeting. "Where's Mother?" asked Meg, as she and Jo ran down to thank her for their gifts half an hour later. "Goodness only knows, some poor creetur came a-beggin' and your ma went straight... Goodness only knows, some poor creetur came a-beggin' and your ma went straight off to see what was needed. There never was such a woman for giving away victuals and drink and clothes and firing," replied Hannah, who had lived with the family since Meg was born and was considered by them all more as a friend than a servant. "She'll be back soon, I guess, so do your cakes and have everything ready," said Meg, looking over the presents, which were collected in a basket and kept under the sofa, ready to be produced at the proper time. "Why, where's Amy's bottles of cologne?" she added, as the little flask did not appear. "She took it out a minute ago and went off with it and put a ribbon on it, or some such notion," replied Jo, dancing about the room to take the first stiffness off the new army slippers. "How nice my handkerchiefs look, don't they? Hannah washed and ironed them for me, and I marked them all myself," said Beth, looking proudly at the somewhat uneven letters which had cost her such labor. "Bless the child, she's gone and put Mother on them instead of M. March. How funny." Wrong voice. "Bless the child, she had gone and put Mother on them instead of M. March. How funny," cried Jo, taking up one. "Isn't it right? I thought it was better to do it so because Meg's initials are M.M., and I don't want anyone to use these but Marmee," said Beth, looking troubled. It's all right, dear. A very pretty idea. Quite sensible. Quite sensible, too, for no one can ever mistake now. It will please her very much, I know, said Meg, with a frown for Joe and a smile for Beth. There's Mother! Hide the basket, quick! Cried Joe, as the door slammed and steps sounded in the hall. Amy came in hastily and looked rather abashed when she saw her sisters all waiting for her. Where have you been, and what are you hiding behind you? Asked Meg, surprised to see by her hood and cloak that lazy Amy had been out so early. Don't laugh at me, Joe. I didn't mean anyone should know until the time came. I only meant to change the little bottle for a big one, and I gave all my money to get it, and I'm truly not trying to be selfish anymore. As she spoke, Amy showed the handsome flask which replaced the cheap one, and looked so earnest and humble in her little effort to forget herself that Meg hugged her on the spot, and Joe pronounced her a trump, while Beth ran to the window and picked her finest rose to ornament the stately bottle. You see, I felt ashamed of my present after reading and talking about being good this morning, so I ran round the corner and changed it the minute I was up. And I'm so glad, for mine is the handsomest now. Another bang of the street door sent the basket under the sofa, and the girls to the table eager for breakfast. Merry Christmas, Marmee! Lots of them! Thank you for our books. We read some and mean to every day, they cried in chorus. Oh, hello, friendly viewers, by the way. Chapter 2, Marmee just came home. Merry Christmas, little daughters. I'm glad you began at once and hope you will keep on. But I want to say one word before we sit down. Not far away from here lies a poor woman with a little newborn baby. 6 children are huddled into one bed to keep from freezing, for they have no fire. There is nothing to eat over there, and the oldest boy came to tell me they were suffering hunger and cold. My girls, will you give them your breakfast as a Christmas present? Oh, thank you for the follow. I really appreciate that. Mamba Legend. I don't know what that is. Christmas present. They were all unusually hungry, having waited nearly an hour, and for a minute no one spoke. Only a minute, for Joe cried impetuously. I'm so glad you came before we began. May I go and help carry the things to the poor little children? Said Beth eagerly. I shall take the cream and the muffins, added Amy, heroically giving up the articles she most liked. Meg was already covering the buckwheats and piling the bread into one big plate. I thought you'd do it, said Mrs. March, smiling as if satisfied. You shall all go and help me. When we come back, we will have bread and milk for breakfast and make it up at dinner time. They were soon ready, and the procession set out. Fortunately, it was early, and they went through the streets. Yeah, first time. It's the first time I'm reading through it. Yeah, totally. So I am learning it as we go as well. So they're about to go, I think, help the orphans. I did see the movie, so I know a little bit about the story, but obviously the book is much thicker. So few people saw them, and no one laughed at the funny party. A poor, bare, miserable room it was, with broken windows, no fire, ragged bedclothes, and a sick mother wailing baby, and a group of pale, hungry children cuddled under one old quilt, trying to keep warm. How the big eyes stared and blue lips smiled as the girls went in. Eich mein Gott, it's the good angels come to us, said the poor woman, crying for joy. Funny angels in hoods and mittens, said Joe, and set them laughing. In a few minutes, it really did seem as if kind spirits had been at work there. Hannah, who had carried wood, made a fire, and stopped at the broken panes with old hats and her own shawl. Mrs. March gave the mother tea and gruel and comforted her with promises of help, while she dressed the little baby as tenderly as if it had been her own. The girls, in the meantime, spread the table, set the children round the fire, and fed them like so many hungry birds, laughing, talking, and trying to understand the funny, broken English. Das ist gut, der Angel Kinder, cried the poor things as they ate, and warmed up their purple hands at the comfortable blaze. The girls had never been called angel children before, and thought it very agreeable, especially Jo, who had been considered a Sancho ever since she was born. That was a very happy breakfast, though they didn't get any of it. And when they went away, leaving comfort behind, I think that there were not in the city 4 merrier people than the hungry little girls who gave away their breakfasts and contented themselves with bread and milk that Christmas morning. That's loving our neighbor better than ourselves, and I like it, said Meg, as they set out their presents while their mother was upstairs collecting clothes for the poor Hummels. Not a very splendid show, but there was a great deal of love done up in those few little bundles, and the tall vase of red roses, white chrysanthemums, and trailing vines which stood in the middle gave quite an elegant air to the table. She's coming! Strike up! Beth, open the door! Amy, 3 cheers for Marmee! Cried Jo, prancing about while Meg went to conduct Mother to the seat of honor. Beth played her gayest march, Amy threw open the door, and Meg enacted escort with great dignity. Mrs. March was both surprised and touched, and smiled with her eyes full as she examined her presents and read the little notes which accompanied them. The slippers went on at once, a new handkerchief was slipped into her pocket, well scented with Amy's cologne. The rose was fastened in her bosom, and the nice gloves were pronounced a perfect fit. There was a good deal of laughing and kissing and explaining in the simple, loving fashion which makes these home festivals so pleasant at the time, so sweet to remember long afterward, and then all fell to work. The morning charities and ceremonies took so much time that the rest of the day was devoted to preparations for the evening festivities. Being still too young to go often to the theater and not rich enough to afford any great outlay for private performances, the girls put their wits to work, and necessity being the mother of invention, made whatever they needed. Very clever were some of their productions: pasteboard guitars, antique lamps made of old-fashioned butter boats covered with silver paper, gorgeous robes of old cotton glittering with tin spangle. Oh, nice to see some bookers. I know, I love fantasy. I've actually, that's mainly what I read. I've just never read any of the American classics. And I figured fantasy books are not in public domain, so it makes it a lot harder to get rights to read them out loud, unfortunately. Very clever were some of their productions: pasteboard guitars, antique lamps, old-fashioned butter boats covered with silver paper, gorgeous robes of old cotton glittering with tin spangle, and from a pickle factory an armor covered with the same useful diamond-shaped bits, left in the sheets when the lids of tin preserves were cut out. The furniture was used to being turned topsy-turvy, and the big chamber was the scene of many innocent revels. No gentlemen were admitted, so Jo played male parts to her heart's content, and took immense satisfaction in a pair of russet leather books given her by a friend, who knew a lady who knew an actor. These boots, an old foil, and a slashed doublet once used by an artist for some picture, were Jo's chief treasures, and appointed on all occasions. The smallness of the company made it necessary for the two principal actors to take several parts apiece, and they certainly deserved some credit for the hard work. They did in learning 3 or 4 parts, whisking in and out of various costumes, and managing the stage besides. It was an excellent jewel for their memories, harmless amusement, and employed many hours which otherwise would have been idle, lonely, or spent in less profitable society. On Christmas night, a dozen girls piled onto the bed, which was the dress circle, and sat before the blue and yellow chintz curtains. In a most flattering state of expectancy, there was a good deal of rustling and whispering behind the curtain, a trifle of lamp smoke, and an occasional giggle from Amy, who was apt to get hysterical in the excitement of the moment. Presently, a bell sounded, the curtains flew apart, and the operatic tragedy began. A gloomy wood, according to the one playbill, was represented by a few shrubs in pots, green baize on the floor, and a cave in the distance. This cave was made with a clothes horse for a roof, bureaus for walls, and in it was a small furnace in full blast, with a black pot on it, and an old witch bending over it. The stage was dark, and the glow of the furnace had a fine effect, especially as a real steam issued from the kettle when the witch took off the cover. A moment was allowed for the first thrill to subside. Then Hugo, the villain, stalked in with a clanking sword at his side, a slouched hat, black beard, mysterious cloak, and the boots. After pacing to and fro in much agitation, he struck his forehead and burst out in a wild strain, singing off his hatred to Rodrigo, his love for Zara, and his pleasing resolution to kill the one and win the other. The gruff tones of Hugo's voice, with an occasional shout when his feelings overcame him, were very impressive, and the audience applauded the moment he paused for breath. Bowing with the air of one accustomed to public praise, he stole to the cavern and ordered Hagar to come forth with a commanding, "What ho, minion, I need thee!" Out came Meg with a gray horse hair hanging about her face, a red and black robe, a staff, and Kabbalistic signs upon her cloak. Hugo demanded a potion to make Zara adore him and one to destroy Rodrigo. Hagar, in a fine dramatic melody, promised both and proceeded to call upon the spirit who would bring the love philter. "Hither, hither from thy home, airy spirit, I bid thee come, born of roses, fed on dew, charms and potions canst thou brew. Bring me here with elfin speed the fragrant philter which I need. Make it sweet and swift and strong, spirit, answer now my song." A soft strain of music sounded. Then, at the back of the cave appeared a little figure in a cloudy white, with glittering wings, golden hair, and a garland of roses on its head. Waving a wand, it sung, "Hither I come from my airy home, afar in the silver moon. Take this magic spell, oh use it well, or its power will vanish soon." And dropping a small gilded bottle at the witch's feet, the spirit vanished. Another chant from Hagar produced another apparition, not a lovely one, for with a bang an ugly black imp appeared, and having croaked a reply, tossed the dark bottle at Hugo, and disappeared with a mocking laugh. Having warbled his thanks, and put the potions in his boots, Hugo departed, and Hagar informed the audience that, as he had killed a few of her friends in times past, she had cursed him, and intends to thwart his plans, and be revenged on him. Then the curtain fell, and the audience reposed and ate candy while discussing the merits of the play. All right, I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. While I do, how is the sound quality from the mic? Is it sounding all right? The curse of doing this live is it's hard to tell how the sound is coming across. All right, the intermission. The curtain fell, audience reposed, ate candy discussing the merits of the play. A good deal of hammering went on before the curtain rose again. But when it became evident what a masterpiece of stage carpentering had been got up, no one murmured at the delay. It was truly superb. A tower rose to the ceilings. Halfway up appeared a window with a lamp burning at it. Perfect. Lamp burning at it, and behind the white curtain appeared Zara in a lovely blue and silver dress, waiting for Rodrigo. He came in gorgeous array with plumed cap, red cloak, chestnut lovelocks, a guitar, and the boots, of course. Kneeling at the foot of the tower, he sung a serenade in melting tones. Zara replied, and after a musical dialogue, consented to fly. Then came the grand effect of the play. Rodrigo produced a rope ladder with 5 steps to it, threw up one end, and invited Zara to descend. Timidly, she crept from her lattice, put her hand on Rodrigo's shoulder, and was about to leap gracefully down when, alas, alas for Zara, she forgot her train. It caught in the window, the tower tottered, leaned forward, and fell with a crash, and buried the unhappy lovers in the ruins. A universal shriek arose as the russet boots waved wildly from the wreck, and a golden head emerged exclaiming, "I told you so, I told you so!" With wonderful presence of mind, Don Pedro, the cruel sire, rushed in, dragged out his daughter with a hasty aside. "Don't laugh, act as if it was all right," and ordering Rodrigo up, banished him from the kingdom with wrath and scorn. Though decidedly shaken by the fall of the tower upon him, Rodrigo defied the old gentleman and refused to stir. This dauntless example fired Zara. She also defied her sire, and he ordered them both to the deepest dungeon of the castle. A stout little retainer came in with chains and led them away, looking very much frightened, and evidently forgetting the speech he ought to have made. Act third was the castle hall, and here Hagar appeared, having come to free the lovers and finish Hugo. She hears him coming, and hides, sees him, put the potions into 2 cups of wine, and bid the timid little servant, bear them to the captives in their cell, and tell them I shall come anon. The servant takes Hugo aside and tells him something, and Hagar changes the cup for the 2 which are harmless. Ferdinando, the minion, carries them away, and Hagar puts back the cup which holds the poison meant for Rodrigo. This is convoluted. It is hard to follow what's going on in this play. Hugo, getting thirsty after a long warble, drinks it, loses his wits, and after a good deal of clutching and stamping, falls flat and dies, while Hagar informs him what she has done in a song of exquisite power and melody. This was a truly thrilling scene, though some persons might have thought that the sudden tumbling down of the quantity of long hair rather marred the effect of the villain's death. He was called before the curtain, and with great propriety appeared leading Hagar, whose singing was considered more wonderful than all the rest of the performance put together. Act fourth displayed the despairing Rodrigo on the point of stabbing himself because he had been told that Zara had deserted him. Just as the dagger at his heart, a lovely song is sung under the window, informing him that Zara is true, but in danger he can save her if he will. A key is thrown in, which unlocks the door, and in a spasm of rapture he tears off his chains and rushes away to find and rescue his lady love. Act fifth opened with a stormy scene between Zara and Don Pedro. He wishes her to go into covenant, but she won't hear of it, and after a touching appeal is about to faint when Rodrigo dashes in and demands her hand. Don Pedro refuses because he's not rich. They shout and gesticulate tremendously but cannot agree, and Rodrigo is about to bear away the exhausted Zara when the timid servant enters with a letter and a bag from Hagar, who has mysteriously disappeared. The latter informs the party that she bequeaths untold wealth to the young pair and an awful doom to Don Pedro if he doesn't make them happy. The bag is opened, and several quarts of tin money shower down upon the stage, till it is quite glorified with the glitter. This entirely softens the stern sire. He consents without a murmur. All join in a joyful chorus, and the curtain falls upon the lover, kneeling to receive Don Pedro's blessing in attitudes of the most romantic grace. Tumultuous applause followed, but received an unexpected check, for the cot bed on which the dress circle was built suddenly shut up and extinguished the enthusiastic audience. Rodrigo and Don Pedro flew to the rescue, and all were taken out unhurt, though many were speechless with laughter. The excitement had hardly subsided when Hannah appeared with Mrs. March's compliments, and would take the lady and Mrs. March's compliments and would like the ladies walk down to supper. This was a surprise, even to the actors, when they saw the table and looked at one another in rapturous amazement. It was like Marmee to get this little treat for them. But anything so fine as this was unheard of since the departed days of plenty. There was ice cream, actually 2 dishes of it, pink and white, and cake and fruit and distracting French bonbons, and in the middle of the table 4 great bouquets of hothouse flowers. It quite took their breath away when they stared first at the table and then at their mother, who looked as if she enjoyed it immensely. "Is it fairies?" asked Amy. "It's Santa Claus," said Beth. "Mother did it," said Meg, smiled her sweetest in spite of her gray beard and white eyebrows. "Aunt March had a good fit and sent the supper," cried Joe, with a sudden inspiration. "All wrong. Old Mr. Lawrence sent it," replied Mrs. March. "The Lawrence boy's grandfather? What in the world put such a thing in his head? We don't know him," exclaimed Meg. "Hannah told one of his servants about your breakfast party. He is an odd old gentleman, but that pleased him. He knew my father years ago, and he sent me a polite note this afternoon saying he hoped I would allow him to express his friendly feeling toward my children by sending them a few trifles in honor of the day. I could not refuse, and so you have a little feast at night to make up for the bread and milk breakfast." "That boy put it into his head. I know he did. He's a capital fellow, and I wish we could get acquainted. He looks as if he'd like to know us, but he's bashful, and Meg is so prim that she won't let me speak to him when we pass," said Joe, as the plates went round and the ice began to melt out of sight with oohs and ahs of satisfaction. "You mean the people who live in the big house next door, don't you?" asked one of the girls. "My mother knows old Mr. Lawrence and says he's very proud. I don't like to mix with his neighbors. He keeps his grandson shut up when he isn't riding or walking with his tutor, and makes him study dreadful hard. We invited him to our party, but he didn't come. Mother says he's very nice, though he never speaks to us girls. Our cat ran away once, and he brought her back, and we talked over the fence, and were getting on capitally all about cricket and so on when he saw Meg coming, and walked off. I mean to know him some day, for he needs fun. I'm sure he does," said Joe decidedly. "I like his manners, and he looks like a little gentleman, so I've no objection to your knowing him if a proper opportunity comes. He brought the flowers himself, and I should have asked him in if I had been sure of what was going on upstairs. He looked so wistful as he went away, hearing the frolic and evidently having none of his own." "It's a mercy you did it, Mother," laughed Joe, looking at her boots. "But we'll have another place sometime that he can see. Maybe he'll help act. Wouldn't that be jolly? I never had such a fine bouquet before. How pretty it is!" And Meg examined her flowers with great interest. "They are lovely, but Beth's roses are sweeter to me," said Mrs. March, smelling the half-dead posy in her belt. Beth nestled up to her and whispered softly, "I wish I could send my bunch to Father. I'm afraid he isn't having such a Merry Christmas as we are." That's the end of chapter 2. I think I'm going to grab a sip of water. I'll go on and read chapter 3 as well. It's a very well-written book. I think the author really captures the little girlishness and the kidness of the 4 children and kind of gives them their very distinct personalities through even just 30 pages. Okay, chapter 3, The Lawrence Boy. Joe, where are you?" cried Meg at the foot of the garret stairs. "Here," answered a husky voice from above, and running up, Meg found her sisters eating apples and crying over the heir of Redcliffe, wrapped up in a comforter on an old 3-legged sofa by the sunny window. This was Joe's favorite refuge, and here she loved to retire with a half-dozen russets and a nice book, to enjoy the quiet and the society of a pet rat who lived nearby, and didn't mind her a particle. As Meg appeared, Scrabble whisked into his hole. Joe shook the tears off her cheeks and waited to hear the news. "Such fun, only see, a regular note of invitation from Mrs. Gardiner for tomorrow night," cried Meg, waving the precious paper and then proceeding to read it with girlish delight. "Mrs. Gardiner would be happy to see Miss March and Miss Josephine at a little dance on the New Year's Eve. Marmee is willing we should go. Now what shall we wear?" "What is the use of asking that when you know we shall wear our poplins because we haven't got anything else," answered Joe with her mouth full. "If I only had a silk," sighed Meg. "Mother says I may when I'm 18, perhaps, but 2 years is an everlasting time to wait. I'm sure our pops look like silk, and they are nice enough for us. Yours is as good as new, but I forgot the burn and the tear in mine. Whatever shall I do? The burn shows horridly, and I can't take any out. You must sit all you can, and keep your back out of sight. The front is all right. I shall have a new ribbon for my hair, and Marmee will lend me her little pearl pin. And my new slippers are lovely, and my gloves will do, though they aren't as nice as I'd like. Mine are spoiled with lemonade, and I can't get any new ones, so I shall have to go without, said Jo, who never troubled herself much about dress. You must have gloves, or I won't go, cried Meg decidedly. Gloves are more important than anything else. You can't dance without them, and if you don't, I should be so mortified. Then I'll stay still. I don't care much for company dancing. It's no fun to go sailing around. I like to fly about and cut capers. You can't ask Mother for new ones. They're so expensive, and you were so careless, she said. She said when you spoiled the others that she shouldn't get you any more until this winter. Can't you fix them anyway? Asked Meg anxiously. I can hold them crunched up in my hand so no one will know how stained they are. That's all I can do. No, I'll tell you how we can manage. Each wear one good one and carry a bad one, don't you see? Your hands are bigger than mine, and you will stretch my glove dreadfully, began Meg, whose gloves were a tender point with her. Then I'll go without. I don't care what people say, cried Jo, taking up her book. You may have it, you may. Only don't stain it, and do behave nicely. Don't put your hands behind you or stare or say, Christopher Columbus, will you? Don't worry about me. I'll be as prim as a dish and not get into any scrapes if I can help it. Now go and answer your note and let me finish this splendid story. So Meg went away to accept with thanks, look over her dress, and sing blithely as she did up her one real lace frill, while Jo finished her story, her 4 apples, and had a game of romps with Scrabble. On New Year's Eve, the parlor was deserted, for the 2 younger girls played dressing maids, and the 2 elder were absorbed in the all-important business of getting ready for the party. Simple as the toilets were, there was a great deal of running up and down, laughing and talking, and at one time a strong smell of burnt hair pervaded the house. Meg wanted a few curls about her face, and Jo undertook to pinch the papered locks with a pair of hot tongs. Oh, that's not going to end well. Ought they to smoke like that? Asked Beth from her perch on the bed. It's the dampness drying, replied Jo. What a queer smell. It's like burnt feathers, observed Amy, soothing her own pretty curls with a superior air. There now, I'll take off the papers and you'll see a cloud of little ringlets, said Jo, putting down the tongs. She did take off the papers, but no cloud of ringlets appeared, for the hair came with the papers, and the horrified hairdresser laid a row of little scorched bundles on the bureau before her victim. Oh, what have you done? I'm spoiled. I can't go. My hair, wailed Meg, looking with despair at the uneven frizzle on her forehead. Just my luck. You shouldn't have asked me to do it. I always spoil everything. I'm no end sorry, but the tongs were too hot, and I should have made a mess, groaned poor Jo, regarding the black pancakes with tears of regret. It isn't spoiled. Just frizzle it and tie your ribbon so the ends come on your forehead a bit, and it will look like the last fashion. I've seen lots of girls do it, said Amy consolingly. Serves me right for trying to be fine. I wish I'd let my hair alone, cried Meg petulantly. So do I. It was so smooth and pretty, but it will soon grow out again, said Beth, coming to kiss and comfort the shorn sheep. After various lesser mishaps, Meg was finished at last, and by the united exertions of the family, Jo's hair was got up and her dress on. They looked very well in their simple suits. Meg in silvery drab with a blue velvet snood, lace frills, and the pearl pin. Jo in maroon with a stiff, gentlemanly linen collar and a white chrysanthemum or 2 for her only ornament. Each put on the one nice light glove and carried one soiled one. That's smart. And all pronounced the effect quite easy and nice. Meg's high-heeled slippers were dreadfully tight and hurt her, even though she would not own it, and Jo's 19 hairpins all seemed stuck straight into her own head, which was not exactly comfortable, but dear me, let us be elegant or die. Have a good time, dearies, Mrs. March said as the sisters went daintily down the walk. Don't eat much supper and come away at 11 when I send Hannah for you. As the gate clashed behind them, a voice cried from a window, Girls, have you both got nice pocket handkerchiefs? Yes, spendy nice, and Meg has cologne on hers, cried Jo, adding with a laugh as they went on, I do believe Mara would ask that if we were all running away from an earthquake. It is but one of her aristocratic tastes, and quite proper for a real lady, is always known by neat boots, gloves, and a handkerchief. replied Meg, who had a good many little aristocratic tastes of her own. Now don't forget to keep the bad breath out of sight, Joe. Is my sash right, and does my hair look very bad? Said Meg, as she turned from the glass in Mrs. Gardiner's dressing room after a prolonged prink. I know I shall forget. If you see me doing anything wrong, you just remind me by a wink, will you? Returned Joe, giving her collar a twitch and her head a hasty brush. No, winking isn't ladylike, and I'll lift my eyes if anything is wrong. I'll lift my eyebrows if anything is wrong, and nod if you are all right. Now hold your shoulders straight and take short steps, and don't shake hands if you're introduced to anyone. It isn't the thing. How do you learn all the proper ways? I never can. Isn't that music gay? Down they went, feeling a trifle timid, for they seldom went to parties, and informal as this little gathering was, it was an event to them. Mrs. Gardiner, a stately old lady, greeted them kindly and handed them over to the eldest of her 6 daughters. Meg knew Sally and was at her ease very soon, but Jo, who didn't care much for girls or girlish gossip, stood about with her back carefully against the garden. Half a dozen jovial lads were talking about skates in another part of the room, and she longed to go and join them, for skating was one of her joys in life. She telegraphed her wish to Meg, but the eyebrows went up so alarmingly that she dared not stir. No one came to talk to her, and one by one the group near her dwindled away, till she was left alone. She could not roam about and amuse herself, for the burnt breath would show. So she stared at people rather forlornly till the dancing began. Meg was asked at once, and the tight slippers trimmed about so briskly that none would have guessed the pain their wearer suffered smilingly. Jo saw a big red-headed youth approaching her corner, and fearing he meant to engage her, she slipped into a curtained recess, intending to peep and enjoy herself in peace. Unfortunately, another bashful person had chosen the same refuge, for as the curtain fell behind her, she found herself face to face with the Lawrence boy. All right, hold on, I need some water. Dear me, I didn't know anyone was here, stammered Jo, preparing to go back out as speedily as she had bounced in. But the boy laughed and said pleasantly, though he looked a little startled, Don't mind me. Stay if you like. Shan't I disturb you? Not a bit. I only came in here because I don't know many people and felt rather strange at first, you know? So did I. Don't go away, please, unless you'd rather. The boy sat down again and looked at his boots till Jo said, trying to be polite and easy, I think I've had the pleasure of seeing you before. You live near us, don't you? Next door. And he looked up and laughed outright, for Joe's prim manner was rather funny when he remembered how they had chatted about cricket when he had brought the cat home. That put Jo at her ease, and she laughed too, as she said in her heartiest way, We did have such a good time over your nice Christmas present. Grandpa sent it. But you put it into his head, didn't you now? How's your cat, Miss March? Asked the boy, trying to look sober, while his black eyes shone with fun. Nicely, thank you, Mr. Lawrence, but I ain't Miss March. I'm only Jo, returned the young lady. I'm not Mr. Lawrence. I'm only Laurie. Laurie Lawrence? What an odd name. My first name is Theodore, but I don't like it, for the fellows call me Dora, so I made them say Laurie instead. I hate my name too. So sentimental. I wish everyone would say Jo instead of Josephine. How do you make the boys stop calling you Dora? I thrashed them. I can't thrash Aunt March, so I suppose I shall have to bear it. And Jo resigned herself with a sigh. Don't you like to dance, Miss Jo? Asked Laurie, looking as if he thought the name suited her. I like it well enough if there's plenty of room, and everyone is lively in a place like this. I'm sure to upset something, tread on people's toes, or do something dreadful, so I keep out of mischief and let Meg do the pretty. Don't you dance? Sometimes. You see, I've been abroad in a good many years, and haven't been about enough yet to know how to do things here. Abroad, cried Jo. Oh, tell me about it. I love dearly to hear people describe their travels. Laurie didn't seem to know where to begin, but Joe's eager questions soon set him going. He told her how he had been at school in Vevey, where the boys never wore hats, and had a fleet of boats on the lake, and for holiday fun went on walking trips about Switzerland with their teachers. Don't I wish I'd been there, cried Jo. Did you go to Paris? We spent last winter there. Can you talk French? We were not allowed to speak anything else at Vevey. Do say some. I can read it, but I can't pronounce it. Quel nom a cette jeune demoiselle? Une penteuse jolieuse? Said Laurie good-naturedly. How nicely you do it. Let me see. You said, who is the young lady in the pretty slippers, didn't you? Oui, mademoiselle. It's my sister Margaret, and you knew it was. Do you think she's pretty? Yes, she makes me think of the German girls. She looks so fresh and quiet and dances like a lady. Jo quite glowed with pleasure at this boyish praise of her sister, and stored up to repeat to Meg. Both peeped and criticized and chatted till they felt like old acquaintances. Laurie's bashfulness soon wore off, and for Joe's gentlemanly demeanor amused and set him at ease, and Joe was her merry self again, because her dress was forgotten and nobody lifted their eyebrows at her. She liked the Lawrence boy better than ever, and took several good looks at him so they might describe him to the girls, for they had no brothers. Very few male cousins, and boys were almost unknown creatures to them. Curly black hair, brown skin, big black eyes, long nose, nice teeth, little hands and feet, tall as I am, very polite for a boy, and altogether jolly. Wonder how old he is. It was on the tip of Joe's tongue to ask, but when she checked herself in time, and with unusual tact tried to find out in a roundabout way. I suppose you're going to college soon. I see you pegging away at the books. No, I mean studying hard. And Joe blushed at the dreadful pegging which had escaped her. Laurie smiled, but didn't seem shocked, and answered with a shrug. Not for 2 or 3 years yet. I won't go before 17 anyway. Aren't you but 15? Asked Joe, looking at the tall lad whom she'd imagined 17 already. 16 next month. How I wish I was going to college. You don't look as if you liked it. I hate it. Nothing but grinding or skylarking, and I don't like the way the fellows do either in this country. What do you like? To live in Italy, and to enjoy myself in my own way. Joe wanted very much to ask what his own way was, but his black brows looked rather threatening as he knit them, and so she changed the subject by saying as her foot kept time, That's a splendid polka. Why don't you go out and try it? If you will come too, he answered with a queer little French bow. I can't, for I told Meg I wouldn't because... There Joe stopped and looked undecidedly whether to tell or laugh. Because what? Asked Laurie curiously. You won't tell? Never. Well, I have a bad trick of standing before the fire, and so I burned my frocks, and I scorched this one, and though it's nicely mended it shows, and Meg told me to keep still so no one would see it. You may laugh if you want to. It's funny, I know. But Laurie didn't laugh. He only looked down a minute, and the expression of his face puzzled Joe, when he said very, very gently, Never mind that. I'll tell you how we can manage. There's a long hall out there, and we can dance grandly, and no one will see us. Please come. Joe thanked him, and gladly went, wishing she had 2 neat gloves, when she saw the nice pearl-colored ones her partner put on. The hall was empty, and they had a grand poke, for Laurie danced well, and taught her the German step, which delighted Joe, being full of swing and sprig. When the music stopped, they sat down on the stairs to get their breath, and Laurie was in the midst of an account of a students' festival at Heidelberg when Meg appeared in search of her sister. She beckoned, and Joe reluctantly followed her into a side room, where she found her on a sofa, holding her foot and looking pale. I've sprained my ankle. That stupid high heel turn, it gave me a sad wrench. It aches so. I can hardly stand, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get home, she said, rocking to and fro in pain. I knew you'd hurt your feet with those silly little things. I'm sorry, but I don't see what you can do except get a carriage or stay here all night, answered Joe, softly rubbing the poor ankle as she spoke. I can't have a carriage without it costing ever so much. I dare say I can't get one at all, for most people come in their own, and it's a long way to the stable, and no one to send. I'll go. No, indeed, it's past 10, and dark as Egypt. I can't stop here, for the house is full. Sally has some girls staying with her. I'll rest till Hannah comes, and then do the best I can. I'll ask Laurie. He will go, said Joe, looking relieved as the idea occurred to her. Mercy, no! Don't ask or tell anyone. Get me my rubbers and put these slippers with our things. I can't dance any more, but as soon as supper is over, watch for Hannah and tell me the minute she comes. They're going out to supper now. I'll stay with you. I'd rather. No, dear, run along and bring me some coffee. I'm so tired I can't stir. So Meg reclined, with the rubbers well hidden, and Joe went blundering away to the dining room, which she found after going into a china closet and opening the door of a room where old Mr. Gardiner was taking up a little private refreshment. Making a dive at the table, she secured the coffee, which she immediately spilled, making the front of her dress as bad as the back. Oh dear, what a blunderbuss I am, exclaimed Joe, finishing Meg's glove by scrubbing her ground with it. Can I help you? Said a friendly voice, and there was Laurie, with a full cap in one hand and a plate of ice in the other. I was trying to get something for Meg, who is very tired, and someone shook me, and here I am in a nice state, answered Joe, glancing dismally from the stained skirt to the coffee-colored glove. Too bad. I was looking for someone to give this to. May I take it to your sister? Oh, thank you. I'll show you where she is. I don't offer to take it myself, for I should only get into another scrape if I did. Joe led the way, as if used to waiting on ladies. Joe led the way, and, as if used to waiting on ladies, Laurie drew up a little table, brought a second installment of coffee and ice for Joe, and was so obliging that Even particular Meg pronounced him a nice boy. They had a merry time over the bonbons and mottos, and were in the midst of a quiet game of buzz with 2 or 3 other young people who had stayed in. When Hannah appeared, Meg forgot her foot and rose so quickly that she was forced to catch hold of Joe with an exclamation of pain. "Hush, don't say anything," she whispered, adding aloud, It's nothing. I turned my foot a little, that's all," and limped up the stairs to put her things on. Hannah scolded, Meg cried, and Joe was at her wit's end till she decided to take things into her own hand. Slipping out, she ran down and finding a servant, she asked if he could get her a carriage. It happened to be a hired waiter who knew nothing about the neighborhood, and Joe was looking round for help when Laurie, who had heard what she did, came up and offered his grandfather's carriage, which had just come for him. He said, "It's so early, you can't mean to go yet," began Joe, looking relieved and hesitating to accept the offer. "I always go early, I do, truly. Please let me take you home. It's all on my way, you know, and it rains, they say." That settled it, and telling him of Meg's mishap, Joe gratefully accepted and rushed up to bring down the rest of the party. Hannah hated the rain as much as a cat does, so she made no trouble, and they rolled away in the luxurious closed carriage, feeling very festive and elegant. Laurie went to the box so Meg could keep her foot up, and the girls talked over their party in freedom. "I had a capital time, did you?" asked Joe, rumpling up her hair and making herself comfortable. "Yes, till I hurt myself. Sally's friend, Annie Moffat, took a fancy to me and asked me to come and spend a week with her when Sally does. She's going in the spring when the opera comes, and it'll be perfectly splendid if Mother only lets me go," answered Meg, cheering up at the thought. "I saw you dancing with the red-headed man I ran away from. Was he nice?" "Oh, very. His hair is auburn, not red, and he was very polite, and I had delicious redowa with him." "He looked like a grasshopper in a fit when he did the new step. Laura and I couldn't help laughing. Did you hear us?" "No, but it was very rude. What were you all about that time, hidden away there?" Jill told her adventures, and by the time she had finished, they were at home. With many thanks, they said good night and crept in, hoping to disturb no one, but the instant their door creaked, 2 little nightcaps bobbed up, and 2 sleepy but eager voices cried out, "Tell about the party! Tell about the party!" When what Meg called a great want of manners, Joe had saved some bonbons for the little girls, and they soon subsided, after hearing the most thrilling events of the evening. "I declare, it really seems like being a fine young lady, to come home from the party in a carriage and sit in my dressing gown with a maid to wait upon me," said Meg as Joe bound up her foot with arnica and brushed her hair. "I don't believe fine young ladies enjoy themselves a bit more than we do, in spite of our burnt hair, old gowns, 1 glove apiece, and tight slippers that sprain our ankles, when we are silly enough to wear them." I think Joe was quite right. All right, that is Chapter 3 as well. I unfortunately have to drop off, but I will continue on with chapters 4 and 5 at a later time. Not sure when, but I will try and do it maybe tomorrow afternoon. So thank you guys for watching. Let's see if we can raid somebody. I don't know if anyone else is reading. I actually haven't heard of people reading. What do we have? Any just chatting channels? I have no idea. None that come to mind, unfortunately. Any questions for me about the book or doing this? Kind of what I'm... Oh, I think it froze. Oh no. Let's see if it catches up. Any questions or anything for me or about the book or reading? Any other suggestions as well? I could probably do 2 books at a time. Let me get some water. A little swallowing ASMR there for you. Well, if not, I do appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoy. And yeah, look forward to catching you next time. Hope you have a great day.